back to another edition of the Inside Badger Hoop Show. Ira Bowman alongside JC Rockhill as always joining you. And man, we've got a special guest on today's show. We've got a good amount to talk about. Both of the Snow College men's and women's teams traveled to Idaho to play CSI and North Idaho. Both teams walked away with the sweep. So we've got a lot to talk about with the amount of wins that the teams had this past week. And to start it off, Badgers still number one, the men's team still number one in the country. They've moved to 22-1 overall, 8-0 now in conference play, and they're on a 15-game winning streak.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they got the clean sweep, both of the teams in Idaho. So, yeah, clean sweep. And when you talk about that ranking, I know I say this a lot of the time, but the fact that they're still getting 15 out of 16 votes really tells me that the men's team are going to be pushing it this week. And I think after great performances on the home court after this week, I think they're finally going to get that 16th vote from number one.
I'd love to see it. Right now, the Badgers men's team averaging 93.3 points per game for 13th in the country. They're averaging 52.6% from the field for fourth. They are top 10 in all three shooting categories. So I just mentioned field goal percentage is fourth. Their free throw percentage is first at 78, and their three-point percentage is 38.8% for ninth best in the country. And they've got four players shooting over 40%. And I was talking to Coach May earlier today. They have the number one offense in the country.
Yeah, and when you watch them on the court, it's definitely understandable to see why. The fact that they're flying around, the fact that they really don't cave in on the pressure regardless of where they are, and not to mention their transition offense is just phenomenal. I touched on it just barely, but the fact that they're able to move the ball so effectively, each player on the court is putting in a lot of hustle. It's just been very dynamic to watch. And you talk about those percentages and how they're top 10 in the nation. They're rebounding 39.1, which is 68th in the country, but they also average 19.3 assists, which is 17th in the country, meaning that 5 of the 6 categories that we just talked about are all top 20.
Yep, and those categories all being in the top 20 have really helped the Badgers gain that 8-0 conference record. With that 8-0 conference record, they're now 2 games ahead in conference because they had played CSI, who was 2 and still is 2, but CSI is now 7-2. Badgers 8-0 in conference play. Behind CSI is Salt Lake at 3-5 and North Idaho at 3-6, and then USUE and CNCC are both at the bottom at 2-6. So outside of Snow and CSI, they're the only teams with an above 500 record in conference play after this past week.
Yeah, and obviously, Snow and CSI, they're the top dogs right now in the conference. But the biggest thing I want to talk about in terms of all these teams in these conferences is don't always look at the conference record, because that doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, I'm looking at the overall records. I mean, CNCC, they're tied for last, like you mentioned, at 2-6, but they are 16-7 overall on the season. So obviously a record is a record, but what you do on the court really speaks for it, and I think that's really been the downfall for a lot of these teams, and of course the upside for Snow and CSI.
Yeah, well, and CNCC just got a huge win over Salt Lake this past week. I think they won by 16. They won at 80-66, so I guess 14 over Salt Lake. So that was a huge win for that program. But why don't we take a dive into the final buzzer with the men's teams from last week. Snow College played at CSI last Thursday. They win 93-89, and not only does the score reflect this, but the way that the game was played, I thought, was very similar to the way that the Indian Hills game played out back in November.
Yeah, I mean, you basically just told the story, gave a preview right there. I mean, this game was really just competitive from the start. Both teams came out strong, but of course, Snow has had the consistency of coming out stronger than the teams that they faced, and they did face some adversity. They were down by 6 at the halftime, 48-42.
Yep. And
the fouls did hurt in the second half, but Snow again pulled away on the road, and tied the game at 87 with 1:34 left, and pulled away with it and was able to come out with the W.
Yeah, so after it was tied at 87, Finlayson hit a 3. So to tie it at 87, Tanner Hayhurst of CSI makes a corner 3, tie ball game, 87 apiece. Ball goes back down the floor. Isaac Finlayson hits a deep 3 on the left wing to make it 90-87. And then after that, the Badgers get a defensive stop. They go back. Isaac Garrett gets an offensive rebound. I believe Chance Trujillo was the one that missed the three. Garrett, offensive rebound, put back. And then on the other end, it was Walker Timmy who got a layup to make it a three-point game. And then McCaden Adams got fouled, made 1 for 2 from the free throw line to make it a 4-point game to really kind of ice it right there with under 10 seconds left, and the Badgers were able to pull out a win late. And then 2 days later, they go to North Idaho, and North Idaho has played snow the best here at the Horn Activity Center. They're the only team so far in conference to not get blown out at the Horn Activity Center. So going into North Idaho, we were expecting a really competitive game, and we got that up until about the last 3 minutes, or last 5-ish minutes of the game.
Yeah, just about that. The thing that was really different for the Badgers in this game is that the offense did struggle. You know, they really struggled on the good looks. You know, they just couldn't really hit any of their shots in the first half, but turned the ball over too much. They had 6 in the first half and just 10 in total. You know, and with a team that's the #1 team in the nation that we really don't see them turn the ball over that often, whether it's home or on the road. So it was very shocking to see them have double-digit turnovers, and they were down 44-22 at half.
44-42.
42. Okay.
44-42.
I was like, that didn't sound too right. Like I was watching all of this.
Where you're getting that 22-point number is Von Weems, the #1 scorer in the country who plays for North Idaho, had 22 of the North Idaho 44 first half points. He finished with 38, I believe, and I believe Isaac Finlinson finished with 27, so he was right there behind him. It was a phenomenal game. So the Badgers won 99-87. It was close, like I mentioned, up until about the last 5 minutes, really the last 3 minutes, and the Badgers just really tightened their grip and pulled the game away out of reach of North Idaho.
Yeah, and no doubt with both of these games, it really just tells you that the Badgers are a never-say-die team, in my opinion. You know, it's kind of like how Charles Barkley described the Houston Rockets back when they were winning titles. It's like a cockroach. The more you step on it, you lift your boot off, and you just see the thing scurry away. They just never say die, and they never give up.
It's exactly kind of what Coach May was getting at when I got the chance to interview him earlier this afternoon. It was a great conversation, and you guys are now going to be able to take a listen into that, so enjoy. Thanks for joining us here on Inside Badger Hoops. Ira Bowman joined today with Coach May, head coach of the men's basketball program here at Snow College. You've had a phenomenal season. You guys are 22-1. And you guys have been really fun to watch this year. Yeah, it's been a great start. I feel like I keep saying that every week. It's great start, great start. Eventually, we'll get to the end of this, but no, super happy with how our guys have done so far, and really excited for what we have down the stretch. Yeah, you guys are #1 in the country right now. You're currently on a 15-game winning streak dating back to November 22nd when you guys played at Odessa. So there was 11 road games in that stretch. There was 8 conference games in that stretch. And in those 15 games, you played 5 ranked opponents who either were ranked or are previously ranked. What has been the key for you guys to be able to have that kind of success against the level of opponent that you're playing in these 15 games? There's definitely more than one key. I would say our guys' consistency to work on a daily basis has been fantastic. Our leadership of our returning captains that have been experienced in playing in the past, I think, has been a huge impact for our team, and just a steadiness that when we go play all these road games against super, high-level teams, these guys have done it before. A lot of these returning sophomores, and so guys like Ike Finlinson, Isaac Garrett, Coleman Ford, Mark Brown. Those 4 in particular played significant minutes for us last year on a really good team. I mean, we were ranked 5th in the country last year at one point of last year. So definitely having those guys back and their consistent leadership has really helped, bringing in all these other guys that are definitely making huge impacts, but kind of giving us that steadiness and that kind of fearless approach. But it's definitely built off of the foundation of just they consistently work every day. They bring it with such energy and enthusiasm and focus that it's a really special thing. Yeah, so those 4 players have helped you guys start 8-0 in conference. It's given you a 2-game lead over everybody else in the Scenic West Athletic Conference. and you come off a week where you've played yet another road trip at North Idaho and at CSI, and you come off with 2 more wins. How do you prepare your players in terms of composure and execution in those tough road environments?
Yeah, and definitely our schedule, like we've talked about before, has lent us to get experience on the road. And once you become comfortable being uncomfortable in road environments, the stuff that in the past would distract you or whatever, you're able to kind of block it out better. And so I think that was definitely intentional as far as playing a really hard schedule. And like we've said that we've played 23 games and 17 of them have been on the road. Like that makes it so you just become comfortable going into other people's places to play. And so I'd say those are probably the biggest things, is our guys becoming comfortable doing that over and over and over again. Makes it so that, you know, when you go play at CSI, well, we've played at Eastern Arizona and at Odessa and at Indian Hills. And so all of those are really ominous environments, but you become comfortable doing it over and over. And so, yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest thing about preparation for that, coupled with kind of giving them a good routine of like, hey, this is what we do on Monday, and this is what we do on Tuesday, and this is what we do on Wednesday when we travel, and this is what we do once we get there to travel. And then so they just get used to that. And so their, you know, kind of excitement and enthusiasm, they have all the energy that they need for game time because they're just used to that.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. What you said about being comfortable or becoming comfortable in uncomfortable situations, that's something that I've heard John Calipari say that he's always done with his freshmen on his really good Kentucky teams.
Yeah, and that's definitely having these freshmen come in and experience it. The freshmen's experience at the beginning of the year, where their eyes are wide and all of that stuff, has definitely changed to now where they're looking forward to each of these challenges to see if they can personally get better and make even more of an impact on our team. And I think that's what you want, is an environment of guys that are trying to contribute and play to the best of their abilities and not fazed by the adversity that they experience when we play all these really good teams.
Yeah, and a guy that's become really comfortable in your system is Isaac Finlinson. He's averaging 22.4 points per game in conference play, 19.1 on the season. How does it help your team to have somebody who can score the ball as well as he can, and even when he's not scoring, impact the game in other levels that still helps your team win?
Yeah, and this is his 3rd year of college basketball. He was at Utah Tech with me when I was down there. And so that maturity, and it is a total reflection of his consistency in practice. Like, he never misses stuff. He works every single day. He crushes it in the weight room. We do shooting drills every day, and he's either the best or the highest, close to the best in doing it every day. And so he's really led us from a leadership standpoint. He was our leading scorer in league last year as a freshman. Mm-hmm. And so for him to like take another step this year in league has been huge for us, especially as we've battled some injuries with Isaac Garrett, as we've had some guys that have been sick and things like that. Every season's full of those kind of things, but his consistency has been really, really helpful. But I would just, like, he's definitely led us in those aspects, but you can see that there's lots of guys that are really good scorers.
Yeah.
And what makes really good teams are multiple guys that contribute on, and you could see that in our CSI game. McCaden Adams had 27, you know, to have a redshirt freshman that's never played at CSI come into that gym and do that, just to me, it speaks of the, like, feeling that our guys have that, hey, it could be his night tonight or that guy's tonight, and we're all happy when it's whoever's night tonight because the goal is to win.
Yeah.
And I think that's another aspect of this team that's been super special, is they play pretty agendaless, as far as they're not just out there to get their own, they're out there to win the game. And that's really special to me in a days of where, like, look, it's all about me getting mine and me getting to the next level and all of those things. Our guys have really bought into the fact that when we are successful collectively, everybody's going to get the stuff individually that they want in the future. And so I think that's part of what's made them special so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned multiple scorers. You have 5 players that have been averaging double digits for the past, I believe, 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And you have 4 players shooting over 40% from 3 right now. So you're definitely having multiple scores, not just Isaac Finlinson.
Yeah.
And the numbers show it.
Yep, and even Mark Brown, who's right below 40% from 3, like, our consistency with having guys score makes it, I mean, we're the number 1 offense in the country, and I think a big reason is because who are you going to stop? If you're going to just take away Isaac Finlinson today, well, we've got Chance Trujillo and Coleman Ford, and Coleman had 25 against CSI the other night. Like, that to me is our guys come into each game with that sort of like, hey, if it's my night, I'm going to roll. And if it's not my night, I'm going to still do everything that I can to win. And we're going to be fine with this other guy rolling tonight. And so I think that's a sign of a special team, is that you can't peg them into one way that they're going to get something done. Like, we have multiple guys that can do multiple things. And that, I think that really helps us to be super hard to guard.
Yeah. And you talked about players wanting to get to the next level, and they know that if the team succeeds, they'll be able to do that. And it feels like at least once a week, one of your players is getting a Division I offer. Every time I check social media, I feel like I'm seeing something. Like Mark Brown Jr. got one the other day from FDU.
Yep.
And what does that mean to your program and to you as a coach, to have your players, to see them getting that much attention from that many national programs? And what does that also say to just Snow College as a school with their GPAs that your players have? Because you have a phenomenal team GPA.
Yeah, what I would say is, number one, I mean, it's really the joy for me of coaching, is helping these guys obviously win games, develop as players, and then get these opportunities in the future. And not just get the opportunities, but be ready to go impact those places that they go. That's the biggest joy and motivation I have in coaching, for sure, is like when they win on an individual level, it's a win for us. And when they, get opportunities that they didn't have before, it's a win for us. And I think it's super special because the college basketball landscape right now is moving more and more to the transfer portal being the primary source of recruiting players, and then supplementing with other sources. And so for us to be getting guys with multiple offers across, from multiple positions on our teams, from our power forward to our point guard to our, it speaks a lot to their consistency and what they're doing. But I also think it's hopefully people recognizing that we're trying to do something special here, and giving guys these opportunities is such a great thing. And then back to your, as you spoke about our GPA as a team, being able to get a 3.8 GPA as a team is ridiculously hard. And I'm super proud of our guys for what they've done in the classroom, their consistency, and that we have a great support staff here at Snow that help them tracking their grades, making sure we're getting assignments turned in, and helping them own their education is a big deal, because we definitely, from the very first day I get them in here, I tell them about, like, these are all about opening doors for yourself. And there's 357 Division I teams out there. As you crush it in the classroom, you get to keep all 357 open. As you struggle in the classroom, now you only got 280 or so that can recruit you. And if you really struggle in the classroom, now we're talking about 100 or 150 schools that can recruit you. And then you're just limiting your options. And so our guys have really bought into that. And I would say our assistant coaches have done a fantastic job tracking them and continually holding study halls to help them as they do their schoolwork. But it's definitely a culture thing that's what we want to be all about, is not just being good basketball players, but being good in our community, being good in the classroom. And ultimately, like, Snow's a special place, and we take a lot of pride in representing the school in a way that, like, people want to be here and people want to recognize how special of a place this is.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I love to hear all of that, because your team is really, really fun to watch, and I think that shows with the level of care that they take in every aspect of being here.
For sure.
So I'm sure you don't get to watch the women's team here at Snow very often, but I mean, you do get to see the end of their games when your players are, going out onto the court for your games. They got two really, really big wins up at North Idaho. They're now still able to be in the conference race for that 4th spot because of those 2 wins. Did you see anything that you really liked from that team?
Oh yeah, and they've, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've seen some changes and things for them that's making them very competitive. Coach Zoo's doing a great job with them, and it's awesome that we pull for each other and that we want each other to be successful, right? Like, and that's kind of the mentality that our guys have as being part of our team, but it's also part of our school. Like, when our football team crushes it, it's awesome. When our softball team is great, it's awesome. When our soccer teams are dominating, it's awesome. Our volleyball teams, I think that mentality, it permeates, and it's contagious, that we're pulling for each other. And I've been part of athletic departments where there's rivalry between sports and things like that. And I definitely feel here at Snow, because of our athletic director, he does a great job of, creating an environment, Rob Nielsen does, of where we're all trying to push together and make it the best that we can be. And so I think our women's team is doing a great job, and hopefully they'll continue that momentum here for the final. I think we have, let's see, 7 games left.
Yeah.
That's definitely going to be huge for them coming down the stretch.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you talk about multiple teams supporting your teams and the women's team. When I'm watching our home games, I can see both the men's and women's soccer team and the softball team, because they're all wearing their gear, and then the football players are pretty easily to spot in the crowd as well. And so seeing that, and they probably make up 50% of the student body that are here watching the games, and so that's huge for the teams as well.
Yeah, and I will say too, like from a home court advantage standpoint, I definitely feel like it's sad that we've only played 6 home games, but every single game that we've played, like each game, it feels like, man, more people are coming, and this is more of a deal and more of a excitement, and it just makes our home court advantage so much better. I mean, to be able to beat CSI on our home floor by 20-something points, almost 30 or whatever it was, is incredible. Like that has not happened, but a huge aspect of it is the support of the people coming to the games that make it a tough environment to play in. And obviously our guys feel that like support and play with even more energy. And probably it's still really special for our guys because we've only played the home at 6 times, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so being able to play 2 home games this week, I know they'll be excited about it.
Yeah, I've been making sure, telling everybody I know to come watch the games this week, because there's been more people in the stands this year, even in the 6 home games consistently, than there was last year in your conference home game. So it's going to be a really fun environment here at the Horn Activity Center this weekend.
Yep, we're super excited for it, and obviously playing CNCC, who beat Salt Lake this last week, will be a huge battle on Thursday, and then playing Salt Lake on Saturday will be a huge battle. Every single one of them's tough, and so having our guys be consistently locked in is always my goal. And not just locked in, but having a mindset of like, hey, we've done some really good stuff, but when you go watch the film of the games that we win, there's plenty of stuff that we're not doing well enough yet. And so having them engage in like, look, this is a process where we're trying to get better for the whole year. Like we want to play as long as we can. And as long as we can, and we keep getting better, the chances are we keep playing longer. You know what I mean? And having a camaraderie with our team in which guys are pulling for each other, guys love playing together, like is super valuable and just special. It's hard to find that because a lot of times guys will be, have their own stuff and they don't like their teammates, or we're lucky so far that we've done well with that.
Yeah, your team's super fun to watch. I'm really excited to watch the games this week. So thanks for watching here on Inside Badger Hoops. Back to the desk. I hope you all really enjoyed that interview. It was a blast for me to be able to do, to get Coach May here in the studio. And you heard everything that he talked about. He really talked about how much they play as a team. I asked him about what it was like to have Isaac Finlinson, who was a good scorer, and he said it was great, but he really just spun that into how many good offensive players they have. And he mentioned McCaden Adams, who had 27 at CSI, and that performance from McCaden Adams in the biggest game of the week for Snow last week was the reason why he's this week's king of the court.
Yeah, and he was just dynamic from all assets of the game, in my opinion. He went 9 for 14 from the field, 3 for 6 from 3, 6 for 10 for the free throw lines. Also got 3 assists and 5 rebounds. So in my opinion, again, this is another easy choice. McCaden Adams, he was just an all-around playmaker in that game. Anywhere on the court, defensively, offensively, he was just doing it all.
Yeah, it was a career high for McCaden Adams that day. Earlier this season in the Badgers' one loss against Midland down in Texas, McCaden Adams had 25, so he just barely beat that this past week against CSI, and it came up huge in a really tight game where some other Badgers were kind of struggling offensively. He hit big shots, timely shots, and then hit the free throw late to really seal it. He was very composed in both games and honestly played good defense as well.
Yeah, no doubt. In terms of the North Idaho College game, I will agree with you on the defensive side as well, because he didn't have much production point-wise in the North Idaho game, but his defense was just locked down from the get-go, really taking advantage of all the minutes that he got. And I really got to give him credit for being as clutch as he was. 2 for 2 from the free throw line wasn't that big, but those 5 rebounds were huge, and of course he finished with 12 total points, and he was just very composed in both those games and really took advantage of the opportunities.
Yep. McCaden Adams is also the conference player of the week, so SWAC player of the week. He's the 5th different Badger on the men's side to win Scenic West Athletic Conference Player of the Week this season. That's huge for Coach May's team and his program and his players, and it really says a lot to Coach May's point in the interview was teams don't really know who to stop because on any given night, one of Mark Brown Jr., Isaac Finlinson, Isaac Garrett, Chance, or McCaden Adams could all go off for double-digit points, or even Coleman Ford. Coach May mentioned Ford as well on that, and I think Lemke also has that ability if he's not given enough attention defensively. So Coach May's got that loaded roster, and McCaden Adams was just able to feed off of everybody else and score enough points, and well, he really just killed it this past week.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, just another easy choice, and I love how I just say that every episode. Every King of the Court is just an easy choice, because they obviously stand out so much, but of course we got to give credit to the depth that the Badgers roster has. We have great bench role players and obviously more than capable starters.
Yep. And now on the women's side, I talked about this in the intro. They got 2 wins this week. One at number 14 CSI, and a game they won by 9 points, 69-60. It was a fun game to watch. It was really intense, kind of like the CSI game that they played here at the Horn Activity Center, except the differences were Coach Zoo's team did not turn the ball over as much, and they scored double digits in all 4 quarters. And all of the keys that we gave in last week's show, the women's team hit all 4 of those keys, and they came out with a 9-point win.
Yep, exactly that. And obviously I'm going to open up with the improvements on offense that I saw on there. Like really it just looked like every player was a little more comfortable with where they were at. I think they were more comfortable playing against CSI. I also think there was a little bit of a personal side to it as well, because as we know, Hadley Richens and Elise Payal, they are former CSI players. So I think they were really disappointed with how they played individually last time against CSI, and they really just like showcased their talents and really just helped their team in a big way.
Yeah, the Badgers shot really well from the field in this game, and especially on 2-point field goals. The Badgers shot 65.7% on 2-point field goals. That's 25 for 38, and they killed CSI in the paint. CSI, I believe, only had 20 paint points, and I believe the Badgers had upwards of 40 paint points, and that was really where the difference came in. Is our looks were, or Snow's looks were right at the rim, whether they were contested or wide open, and that was a huge reason why so many of the Badgers were able to play well in terms of scoring, and we had multiple Badgers in double digits in this game, and it was a lot of fun to watch to see the improvement.
Yeah, no doubt. I definitely think you saw a big weight just be lifted off of the Badgers' shoulders. Obviously, like they've been struggling with conference play. These 2 wins this past week are obviously huge, and I think that they just feel a lot more comfortable right now and definitely a lot more confident knowing that they can stick with these conference teams that they have struggled against. Obviously, number 14 CSI, like you mentioned, a nationally ranked team going into their house and just beating them like they did and being consistent on both ends of the court was just really great to watch.
Yep. Coach Zoo's team had 3 players in double-digit scoring. Hawaii Rangi had 18, Pennington had 13, and Iona Bay had 12. And then for CSI, they only had 1 player who had double-digit scorings. It was
Gillette.
Gillette had 10, so barely double-digit scoring. And then I talked about the paint points just a second ago. Badgers scored 40, CSI only scored 22. So that's an 18-point difference, which can mean a lot when you only win a game by 9 points. I mean, that's half of those paint points, really.
Yep, definitely. And it goes back to the defensive presence of Iona Bay being back. And again, I'm going to give credit to Elise Payal. She's stepped up huge again. Like we've steadily seen her improvements throughout the year, and she's really become quite the partner to Iona Bay in terms of the work and production in the paint.
I couldn't agree more. And to follow up that upset, the Lady Badgers went up to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and played the North Idaho Cardinals in a game that was an absolute thriller. Final score, Badgers 76, North Idaho 69 in overtime. It was a huge performance, and the best improvement that I saw in this game, really both this past week, was 4th quarter execution and composure from Coach Zoo's players, and it really showed in that overtime. In that overtime, Coach Zoo's team scored 18 points, the Badgers did. That was more than they scored in any of the 4 previous quarters in that game by 1.
Yeah, and it's just astonishing to me that they could just stay so integral and not just sort of give in to the fatigue factor as well. The fact that they're not giving in to the exhaustion, not making stupid shots or anything like that, or taking stupid shots, excuse me, or really being sloppy on defense, like fouling way too much. I think it was just a really all-around team performance again, but obviously there were some noticeable superstars out there.
Yeah, the Badgers went 4 for 8 from the field in overtime and went 9 for 10 from the free throw line in overtime. And 6 of those free throws were all by Hawaiki Rangi. She went 9 for 10 from the free throw line by herself in this game and played phenomenally well on the defensive end and on the offensive end. Hawaiki Rangi had 18 points, like I mentioned, at CSI. She had 17 at North Idaho and had 8 of the 18 Badger points in overtime in Coeur d'Alene. And she played phenomenally well, and that's why she's this week's queen of the court.
Yep, obviously the points are as impressive as they get, the 18 and the 17 points. Obviously some great shooting percentages, 9 from 11 from the field against CSI, 4 for 7 from at North Idaho, which obviously is kind of a downgrade, but as you mentioned, those 9 for 10 free throws was just really fun to watch. And again, I'm going to give her credit on the defensive end because that has been the stalwart of Hawaiki Rangi really since she's been here and we've been watching her.
Yeah.
She had 5 steals against CSI and also had a block in both of those games. 5 rebounds against North Idaho. And as you mentioned, those 8 points in the overtime and 6 for 6 from the free throw line. I'm sure, as you mentioned, obviously those are the clutch points. Those are the ones that you really want, and she executed perfectly.
Yeah, she also had 2 steals at North Idaho with a block and then 5 rebounds in both games. Like you mentioned, played phenomenally well down the stretch. And as well as she played to be this week's queen of the court through both games, Ayanna Bay also had a breakout game against North Idaho. She scored 22 points on 9 of 13 shooting in 31 minutes for Coach Zhu's team and had 9 rebounds. So almost a 20-10 game for Ayanna Bay, and it has been amazing to see her back on the floor for Coach Zhu.
Yeah, no doubt. You can just see that the impact she makes on the court and off the court. She's a very supportive teammate, no doubt. A really reliable target for the point guard trio of Pennington, Richens, and Elliott. So yeah, her presence alone can just change everything for this whole team, and you can see it week in and game out.
Yep. Now, coming up on this Thursday, that's February 6th at 5 p.m., Hawaiki Rangi and Ayanna Bay, along with the rest of the Lady Badgers, will be taking on Colorado Northwestern, who for a while was Snow College's only win in conference play after playing at CNCC in their second conference game of, the season. It was a great game at CNCC, but coming in this week, CNCC is now 0-8 in conference play. They're 3-20 overall, averaging 50 points a game. But it should be fun to see Ayanna Bay, Hawaiki Rangi, and then the trio of the guards for Coach Zhu's team to play against CNCC, and it's all the C's. They're just rolling into each other.
Yeah.
And, but it should be fun to watch Coach Zhu's team to try and get their first home conference win this week.
Yeah, and it would be really good to get that win at home, obviously, because they were undefeated at home before the conference season, obviously.
Well,
and
there was the Western Wyoming game that the Lady Badgers had lost right before the winter break. But before that Western Wyoming game, the Lady Badgers hadn't lost at home.
Yeah, that's true. And that was a devastating loss, no doubt. And they really need to capitalize on this opportunity because the women's CNC team, they are 3-20 overall in the season and 0-8 in the conference. Only average about 50 points per game and are 29.5% from the field.
Yep.
So obviously lackluster numbers, but that's going to lead me into my first key of this game for the Lady Badgers. Do not underestimate your opponent whatsoever, because the numbers, those are just the numbers. That doesn't tell you how the players are going to come out in a game. And obviously, the second key of the game is, again, limit the turnovers. We saw a lot of improvement last week, so I'm expecting them
Only 20 turnovers, I believe, in both of those games for Coach Zhu's team. So
Yep.
that's still a lot and can still be improved upon, but that's improvement from the last couple home games where they had 30 and 33.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's definitely something, again, Coach Zhu is definitely going to want to limit. And the third key to this game for me is just move the ball pretty fast, get those fast break points especially, and just get those easy buckets.
Yep. And then following that game at 7 p.m. will be the #1 team in the country, the men's Badger basketball team, taking on the men's scenic Colorado Northwestern Community College team, who just came off a huge upset over Salt Lake. That game was in Colorado, so a little bit of a home court advantage for CNCC, but their record doesn't show how good they are. If you ask me and ask Coach May and everybody else that I've kind of talked to in the conference, that they are better than what their record shows, and they beat Salt Lake. And with this week, they have a chance to knock off the #1 team in the country here at home. They gave Snow some trouble in the first half. I believe it was a 5-point game at halftime when Snow College played at CNCC in their second conference game of the season, and then Coach May's team took control and won the game by double digits. But you can't allow that 5-point game at halftime to happen here at the Horn Activity Center.
No, not at all. CNCC, they just really do have a lot of talent. Like you mentioned, they're a very sneakily athletic team, and they do play good defense, and they are very dangerous when they get cooking as well, whether it's hitting their shots or shutting down teams on defense. So that's going to lead me into another key. In my opinion, though, this first key, it's just like the women's team. Don't underestimate your opponent. But I personally think that this Badgers men's team is just too locked in right now, and I think they're really just going to look and dominate in the Horn Activity Center, because in the last 2 home games, we've seen them score over 120 points. Well, 120 points was in one game. They scored 110 in the next game, excuse me. So, over 100 points in the last 2 home games. I definitely think that's going to be something that they want to utilize and target for. And the fact that one of those games they hit 19 three-pointers, that's definitely something that the Badgers are going to have to lock in on, hitting the big shots when they can get them, and just not underestimating Colorado Northwestern.
Well, and you mentioned the triple-digit scoring, how many games they've had recently, over 100. The Badgers have only played 6 games here at the Horn Activity Center. They've scored 100 points in 4 of those 6 games.
And it's just phenomenal to watch, the offensive dynamics of it all. So, as I mentioned, CNCC, they're a very sneakily athletic team, and they can get hot when they're, cooking and everything, hitting those big shots. So I think defense, you really got to lock in as well. But we have seen the Badgers again. I'm really not worried about it. I think they're going to be way too locked in the game overall to really let anything get going against them.
The one thing that almost became a problem, did become a problem for Coach May on the road last week, was foul trouble. And that's something that Coach May is going to have to watch this week as well.
No doubt. Especially when it's your big play guys, whether it's Isaac Garrett or Mark Brown Jr., you just don't want your guys to foul out, especially if they're the game changers like McKaden Adams or Isaac Finlinson. And I'm not saying that the Badgers don't have the depth to take over the game. Obviously, they have a really good trio in the paint. I think Sean Feltz, Aaron Bliss, and Kyle Lemke, Kyle Lemke. Sorry, I almost said Noah Lemke for a second.
I keep doing that. I keep second guessing myself. I'll say Kyle, and I'm like, no, Noah. And then I'm like, no, it is Kyle, because Kyle's older brother Noah played here last year for Coach May, and so I do the same thing.
Exactly. So Kyle Lemke, he's going to be huge in this game, especially alongside Feltz and Bliss in the paint. So I think it's really going to come down to how the perimeter is guarded. I think Finlinson's going to have to step up a little bit more on the perimeter, and I definitely think that McKaden Adams is going to be dynamic. And Mark Brown Jr., he's going to have to really control the paint in this one. Or the point, excuse me.
Point, paint.
Gosh, I can't talk today.
And then on Saturday, there's only going to be one game. The women won't play against Salt Lake, but the men will here at the Horn Activity Center. The women will have to wait until March 6th, the last game of the regular season, to play Salt Lake at home. So the women will go to Salt Lake twice and play everybody else 3 times before they play Salt Lake at home. Going into this Salt Lake City game, I think for the men's, it's really going to come down to the fact that Salt Lake City, as we mentioned in the beginning, is 3-5 in the conference, but are 15-8 overall on the season. Obviously, they have been really struggling lately. But again, I think it's really going to have to come down to how the Badgers want to defend the Activity Center. And this time, Salt Lake they'll have Xavier Edmonds in this game. And the last time the Badgers played Salt Lake at Salt Lake, Xavier Edmonds was ejected within the first 8 minutes. And Edmonds was having a phenomenal game. I believe he had 11 points in the first 8 minutes of the game. He'd only missed 1 shot and then was ejected, and he's now back with playing. So The Badgers will have to watch out for Xavier Edmonds.
Yep, no
also,
doubt.
Ethan Copeland had a big game when they played in Salt Lake City.
Yep.
And now here at the Horn Activity Center, they're going to have to lock up.
Yeah, and Xavier Edmonds, when I first think about him, he's a very, very passionate player, very emotional player, which I personally really like. You want that kind of guy that everybody's a little afraid of. But so I think for Salt Lake City going into this game, it's really going to come down to the mental battle.
The Badgers will need to do a few things to come out with the home win and stay undefeated, in both games to stay undefeated. But in this Salt Lake game, they'll have to come down to a few key things in order to come out with the win.
Yeah, and the first one I think is definitely force turnovers of their own. Get some fast break points. Take control of the game from the defensive side. Really force the pressure onto the point guards and even the paint players of Salt Lake City Community College. But at the same time, I would definitely say limit your own turnovers because we had 16 turnovers.
At Salt Lake.
Yeah, at Salt Lake.
At Salt Lake, 16 turnovers for 22 points off of turnovers, which is more than what the Badgers have given up since then.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we mentioned it earlier when we talked about the games from last week, 6 turnovers against CSI and then 10 turnovers against North Idaho. And previously here at the game against Utah State Eastern, the Badgers only had 6 turnovers in that one. So Coach May's team doesn't really turn the ball over at home, and that's going to be something they are going to have to do in order to come out with the win against a good Salt Lake team.
Yeah, and if you do start struggling with turnovers, that means you're going to have to be better in your transition defense. You got to get back as fast as you can before they can get fast break points or even set up their offense. And so, therefore, you have to really communicate and really see where everything is at.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. And then we already talked about how the Badgers have scored 100 points in 4 of their 6 home games. Yep. So maybe we see another one. Maybe it's a close game. Maybe it's more like the North Idaho game, but maybe it could be like the Utah State Eastern game or the CSI game. The Badgers have had both close and blowout games here at the Horn Activity Center. Yep. Undefeated at home, looking to stay that way this week with 2 games against North Idaho, or 1 game against CNCC and 1 game against Salt Lake. And then the women's team looking to get their first home win this week. Thanks so much for watching Inside Badger Hoops. Ira Bowman, JC Rockhill, logging off. Have a great evening, night, whatever it is.